Get this going. Okay, this is Dr. Rhonda Farrell, the webinar chair for ASQ Innovation TC, welcoming all of you to our last webinar of 2023. We hope that you've had a wonderful year with us with our guest speaker, and tonight is going to be extra special. Tonight we have Miss Erin Urban, our influencer, leader, mentor, coach, author, extraordinaire, bringing you Elevate Innovation, More Impact and Less Stress, Session 2. For those whom are just joining us, we ask you to please put in the chat where you're from, what brought you to the session, and what's one question you might have for our coach tonight. And with that, I will turn over our session to Miss Erin Urban.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Rhonda, and I'm excited to share this space with all of you to discuss how we can empower ourselves and our brains to tackle the very interesting times we're living in right now, and leverage that 3-pound pink blob between our ears to deliver real results in your careers and in your personal lives. The more I learn about how the brain works, the more fascinated I am. It's amazing how simplistic it is, yet our culture, our society, and our familial conditions often counter to what actions we must take to truly embrace positive success in our lives. Now, I see some notes in the chat right now about what you're interested to learn about during our conversation and where you're from. So I want to welcome you from wherever you're tuning in from, across the U.S. and across the world. I see some folks from Toronto, Canada, Casey, Missouri, Buffalo Grove, Illinois, Tampa, Florida, and some people looking to influence people. Yes, you're in the right spot. And very interestingly, they really need experiences to practice change management in a traditional industry. Honestly, right now, Dennis, practicing change management in any industry is very interesting. So we'll be talking about some specifics that will help you in those areas. And someone said, I'm getting cold. Yes, Rampton, it's getting cold there. It's cold here too. In Texas, it dropped below 50. Therefore, it's freezing and we don't know how to act. But let's get started in diving in. First things first, I have a question for you. Now that you've put all that lovely information in the chat, I have a question for you. And that question is, what factors do you feel impact your influence? What do you think impacts your ability to influence others? I'd love to hear what you have to say in the chat. And perhaps, what you're seeing right now in your workplace, perhaps some roadblocks that you feel might be coming up for you, or what's going on when you think about influence. Because oftentimes when we talk about that word, something specific comes to mind. It might be a vision, might be a feeling, it might be something going on in your body. Either you're excited about it or you're like, oh, that thing. Do I have to be political at work? How do we influence others? And no, it's not manipulation. So let's see, Linda said, my job title, level of position. Yes, that can be influential depending on the culture. Energy and past experience with successes to share. Yes, absolutely, tremendously. Who you are and how you're showing up. Personality to that point, says Rita. And passion, again, Ramden, yes, absolutely. Who are you largely defines how you can influence. There's a saying, who you are is how you lead. And the same thing goes for influence. Who you are is how you influence. So no surprise, we'll be diving in a little bit about how we can empower ourselves to be more influential and, most importantly, deliver the impact and receive the impact that we want in our lives. But what about appearances? Isn't appearances important? In all seriousness, although I do chuckle quite a bit because how many of us are, all business from here up. I know in the 80s, this is business in the front and party in the back. Well, now it's business from the waist up. But in all seriousness, do you feel that your mindset, for example, can elevate your influence? Mindset, when we're talking about how we are and who we are and how we're showing up, really matters, whether or not we can influence and how much impact we have, not only with ourselves, but also with those around us. Take, for example, with someone who wants to, influence and change management. Does our mindset have a part to play? No, what do you think? Yes, a couple of people say, yes, it does. Yes, you're right. We actually have much more impact over our reality than we can possibly imagine. And from what I've seen as a change agent over the years and consultant and coach, the vast majority of people around the world are completely unaware that how we think drives results. Your thinking is actually the single most powerful tool you have as a human being. Your thinking about life drives your micro actions, those little tiny actions that you don't even think about. Now, those micro actions are designed by your brain to elicit or create the experience in alignment with your expressed priorities and beliefs. In other words, your mindset, your worldview, your biases, what your perspective is, your mental tone. It drives all these micro actions based on that priority set by what we call in our modern world mindset. And these micro actions might be the very words we choose in an email or a text, or whether or not we email versus text or call somebody, right? Or whether we take action now or action later. All boil down to one simple thing: how we think about whatever that is. Simply how we think drives all of our micro actions. And as we have our discussion, we'll understand more about why that's so important and so powerful. Because, my friends, you have much, much more impact than you possibly can realize. In fact, research has shown even the most introverted person, the most reserved individual who, when we went into lockdown in 2020, was like, yes, I don't have to go out and see people. Even that person will impact around 20,000 people in their lifetime. Now, let's look at you and me. How many people do we actively impact in our lives? Unknowingly, perhaps. I'll give you a short example. I was in the grocery store. Now, this was pre-pandemic, to be fair, but even now the same thing holds true. And I happened to be apparently shopping for the same things this young man was shopping for. And he was on the phone the whole time. He had his little Bluetooth doohickey in his ear, and he was cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha, and I got to learn more about his dating life than I wanted to know. So by the time we got to the checkout counter, I mean, he was still chatting away. He put his things on the belt, totally ignoring the cashier entirely. And you could watch the cashier's face just go into this expression of, what a jerk, beep, doesn't even know I'm here, beep. And this guy never stopped talking to whomever it was, never acknowledged the cashier, paid, and left. It was my turn. I looked at the cashier and I said, how are you doing today? Did you have a good weekend? And you can watch that person's face transform. Now, that might be a small instance, but that should help you understand that even that small thing made a huge difference to that person. So how many people do we actually impact? And thinking, maybe extrapolating that and blowing that up a little bit. Well, we're change agents, or coming into organizations, or working within organizations, consultants or full-time employees, or what have you, whatever capacity. And what kind of impact are we putting out there by those micro actions, those simple decisions that we make every day? And our mindset has a huge part to play in it. And as I shared in my best-selling book, Elevate Your Career for More Impact and More Income, When it comes to self-development and career growth, I said verbatim, you can only pivot when you're mentally ready. Reading a book, listening to a podcast, listening to a webinar like this one, for example, or an insightful video, doesn't automatically create a catalyst for change. It doesn't. Wouldn't it be nice if that was the case? I would ship this book to everybody in the world. However, it's like lighting a match on the moon. Chances are, unless you have the right atmosphere, it won't burn. So my friends, if you skip creating the right internal atmosphere for growth, you might get a few results, but you'll find it difficult to sustain them. And it's also highly likely that you'll eventually self-sabotage. Right? But there's good news. What I know for sure is this. What we know, not just me, but scientists, and I'm not a scientist, I'm a neuroscience nerd, so let's get that clear right off the bat. If you didn't see session 1, I'm a neuroscience nerd, coach, etc. And I love studying more about that, and I'll share more about that in a minute. But what I know for sure is this. Your ability to influence, impact, innovate is driven by you. It's entirely up to you. Now, yes, are there environmental factors? Of course there are. And by and large, it has a lot to do with how you approach them. Take, for example, let's give this a for instance. Let's just say technology went back and things didn't work out so well and I couldn't get things to work. Now, as a speaker, how I can influence those people I'm speaking with entirely depends on how I handle that situation. The same thing goes for the virtual interviews or presenting at work. Things may not necessarily go to plan. However, it's how you handle them that matters most. In fact, I've had more than one client where things didn't go so well actually be a better candidate because of how they handled the situation. Now, what's interesting is most people aren't consciously aware of their own impact or even how to fully leverage it. Yet, there still isn't a normalized method to understand your full potential yet. However, awareness is the first step, and knowledge is power. So let's see a few things here in the chat here. Does that mean the only channel is communication? Can you share a little bit more, Ramton, what you mean by that? Only channel to influence people. Oh, through communication. Well, actually, there's a lot of different channels, and I'll touch on that a little bit because the more we learn about neuroscience, the more we understand that it's communication. Let's just take the word communication, for example, and then I'll get back to my topic. I don't want to segue too much. So communication in of itself is a multifaceted thing, particularly for human beings. Now, what's interesting is in this virtual world we're living in tremendously these days, we only get to see people in this little box. So what does that mean? Well, in order to effectively influence people, we need to be particularly cautious and intentional about what we're doing in that little box, because this is the only data people are receiving. In person, however, it's a much more rich and deep experience, a 360-degree view, if you will. You get much more data about someone, even from those minor nuances, such as a sharp inhale of breath or someone's skin tone. I mean, have you ever looked at somebody and go, wow, are you feeling okay? And it's just because of their body language, maybe they didn't say anything. They didn't go walk up to you, I'm feeling terrible. They didn't do that. However, yet you were able to pick up on that. So communication between humans is a very rich and deep topic that I can probably give a whole webinar on. But I'd like to share with you that even as early as high school, I was fascinated by why some people had it all. So why did I focus on neuroscience, and why do I care about professional success? Because I was curious as why some people succeeded and other people apparently didn't really do so well. Why were some people popular and other people pushed aside? And I found that popularity didn't really coincide with morals and ethics per se. What drives people to act counter to what you would seem is common sense. Why do some people achieve goals, yet others wander aimlessly. And as we mature, we seem to see the same play reenacted on different stages throughout our lives. Let me know what you think about that. Are you seeing kind of the same plays in some degrees enacted on different stages throughout your life? So for most of my life, now formally in the last decade, I've studied the science of success. And what I've discovered is, particularly in recent years, is very eye-opening. So my intent during our conversation together is to share with you some of what I've learned to help you navigate this very interesting and hopefully not normal yet time. It's what I call the never normal. Right now, we're in a strong transition phase. And I don't want to go into that great detail. I do want to give you a lot of tools to handle this and most importantly, elevate your impact with less stress. So what we'll discover together, speaking of, is how the brain actually works. How can you leverage that 3-pound soft squishy thing between your ears? And well, why the heck does it matter? Most importantly, why haven't they taught this in popular education? I don't understand. There is so much rich knowledge there. Irregardless, we'll go through some of that, and no, I won't use weird words and terms. Most importantly, what we're doing is focusing on how to create the impact you want for yourself and around others, and establish a mindset. We talked about that mental environment. Establish that mental environment that allows you to achieve things easier, faster, quicker, better, less stress, all the goodies, and make space for more opportunities. Because oftentimes, even the things that we think we should be doing is actually restricting opportunities. We don't want that. And inspire and ignite innovation, which is creativity, right? And those around you and in yourself. Now, what's interesting, before we dive in, is I want to share something with you from my cycling and mountain biking hobby. Because there's a saying in mountain biking that you focus on where you want to go and it will flow. Look at it like this. If you stare at a stone or a tree, chances are you'll hit it. Trust me, I know. I have scars to prove it. I'm not good at mountain biking. So if you don't remember anything else from either of these two sessions we've had together in this series, please remember this. Focus on what you want, not on what you don't. And there's a really good reason for that, and I'll share more later. But in order to leverage our empowered mind, let's turn what you know, or we think we know, about the brain inside out. Ready? Let's go. Let's do it. This is exciting. Okay. Surprise! Your brain's primary role is not thinking. Nope. Your role in the brain, 3-pound thing, the primary role is not to think. No. The brain's primary job, and it's a big job, is not thinking. It is, I know it's shocking, it is to manage a very complex body budget. Now think of your brain as a master accountant. Now there's a very complex body budget to keep you alive. It has to keep track of all the chemicals in the body, what's going on, who's talking to who's not talking to who, what's going on, what's flowing, what's not flowing, all the sensory data coming in, and what you've eaten, maybe what you should be eating and haven't eaten, therefore having a craving for fat during the wintertime makes sense. As a result, some of its systems are, well, a little interesting. Your brain is designed to conserve energy. Because it's a very complex body budget, and by the way, just the operating of the brain takes 20% of that daily operational budget, it's a big energy hog. So, we want to stay alive, basically, so we can procreate. That's, I know, not very exciting. That's what we're here for. Well, I don't know, maybe it is exciting, but that's not what we're here to talk about. Where did that come from? Your brain is designed to conserve energy. And this is one reason why habits are formed. I mean, just imagine if you had to wake up every day and learn how to do something all over again. We would never get anywhere. We would never progress as a race. It wouldn't work. So habits take less energy. There's a saying that neurons that fire together wire together. You may have heard this before. And they fire and wire together more often, developing thickened neural pathways. So the signal travels easier, it takes less energy, and it becomes a habit. Now, there's also another reason why we avoid change for all you change agents out there. Because new things, developing new things, takes energy. It takes energy to fire and wire new neurons and networks and create those new things together. It takes energy. It takes glycogen, which is a finite resource for the brain. Now, what's also interesting is a brain needs change. So it's a balance. So it's almost like your brain, unbeknownst to you, when it's confronted with potential change, if it has anything to say about it, right? It has to go this, okay, well, what's the ROI? What's in it for me? So, change agents, and you probably already know this, this is a really good reason why we need to make sure people understand what's in it for them. What will they get out of this change, provided they have a choice, right? If they don't have a choice, how can we approach it in a way that helps them understand how to latch onto it to leverage it for their best interest? This is why it's very important to do that, because the brain is always looking to manage this budget. It has to. That is its primary role. All right. So there's several things to consider here as we think about this. Now we think about habits particularly. And there's a reason why we talk about habits, because habits can be great and they can be super unuseful, like bad habits and bad ways of thinking. So repeated patterns of thought are taken as express priority. So if you continually think a certain way, your brain thinks that's a priority. It doesn't have any discernment whether that way of thinking is right, wrong, or indifferent. That's not its job. All its job is to try to create the world experience by which you have given it the indication that's what you want based on where you focus your energy. So if you repeatedly think a certain way, then it thinks that's what you want. Okay? If you think a certain way, by the way, and often enough, it can form a habit, which can be good or not. And also, interestingly, your brain wants to prove you right. One, it takes less energy. And two, it wants to deliver experiences based, again, on your expressed priorities. So, what do you think about that so far? Let me know in the chat what you're thinking about that one. Here's the next turn your brain inside out. Okay, here we go. Neuroscientists, and this is relatively new, I'll go into more of that in a minute. Neuroscientists like to say that your day-to-day experience is like a carefully controlled hallucination. Basically, what they're trying to say here is your brain gives meaning to everything you process from your sensory input. But this meaning is entirely defined by you. Okay? If there is no, you were born and this temperature is bad or good. You were born into this world a fairly blank slate. I mean, not totally blank. There are some things that are by nature, but by and large, how we operate in our worldview is through nurture, how we have taken the worldview from those who we've looked up to, our parents, etc., as we grew up. But this meaning is entirely defined by you. And in a process that even Dr. Lisa Barrett admits defies common sense, you're almost always acting on the prediction that your brain is making about what is going to happen next. Not what has happened, what is going to happen next. It's not reacting to the experience as it unfolds. In other words, your brain is not taking in sensory data and then deciding what to do. Your brain is taking in the sensory data that it just got and predicting what is going to happen next, because you're already in action, whether it be mentally or physically, before it receives a final sensory data. Yeah. You lost me. I know, I get it. Okay. Stick with me here. All right. Your brain predicts what is going to happen next. It does not react. So based on the sensory data it received about the past moment, it's predicting about what is about to happen in the next moment. So your minds, your emotions, your actions are already in play before it receives the final sensory data at that moment. It's predicting what is going to happen. In other words, and I'll give you an example. This will help. There was a young man who was conscripted into the army, and he was in South Africa. And there's guerrilla fighters, a very tense, stressful environment. And he was out one day doing a practice with his troop. And when he saw through the bushes, he heard this rustle and this noise. And of course, he's, pretty tensed up because it is an active warfare area. And what he saw through the bushes was a guerrilla fighter with a rifle and a whole troop of guerrilla fighters behind him, all armed and ready, armed to the teeth. So as he raised his rifle, his friend reached over and said, "Hey, don't shoot. It's just a boy." And he blinked. And all of a sudden, he saw what it really was. It was a young cattle herder, a young boy with a stick, and a whole herd of cows. This bothered this man for years. And finally, what he came to find out was his brain had predicted wrong. This is neuroscience. It's not brand new. It's 10 years old. And why isn't it popular knowledge and why isn't it in all the textbooks? Well, quite frankly, because top neuroscientists don't have good marketing departments. That's why. So why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this to help you understand how powerful your mindset, your expectations are. This is how powerful, because your brain is predicting what is happening, not reacting to it. The most agile minds can adjust in the moment like this man did. He was able to adjust, and he didn't shoot a young man and all of his cows, thank goodness. But what's very interesting is, and what they theorize, is the animals who were able to predict the best and the fastest were the ones who survived versus those who had to think about it. Like, okay, this is happening to me. What do I do? You're already in motion. For example, emotions actually don't happen to you. They are created, chemically, of course, as your brain determines how it should respond based on your predetermined program or mindset. That's what's actually happening. Now, I can hear the crickets on the other end. I can feel this wave of, what did she just say? Yes, it's unbelievable, Ramton. It's true. It's neuroscience. It's 10 years, about a decade ago, scientists realized this and started really diving into this. And this is how your brain actually works. So Michelle says, okay, our biases impact how we react based on our assumptions. Yes, absolutely. So let's just say, and like in the last session, I talked about the in-law, right? The in-law's gonna be over Thanksgiving. This is pre-Thanksgiving. Well, let's think, okay, we've got a friend coming over for Christmas, and that friend, when they drink way too much eggnog, acts a certain way. Well, whether or not they do may be exacerbated by the fact that your brain is predicting that they will. So that's why it's very important to check your assumptions regularly. That makes you a much more agile and much smarter in the moment. Your brain is much more well equipped to adjust more quickly, right? Because we're predicting about what is happening next. Now, I may have blown your minds a little bit, so let's take a step back and ask a question. Do you think your brain's predictive process can impact your ability to influence? Yes or no? What do you think? While you're thinking about that, not only does it predict what is about to happen, or what is happening. Actually, no, what is about to happen. It predicts what is happening and what is about to happen. So let's say you step outside and you're convinced it's going to be freezing. For the first nanosecond, like first millisecond of this microsecond, a little bit of a second, you feel cold until that sensory data catches up to you. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. Great. Thank you. Yeah. So in addition to predicting what is actually happening at the moment, it filters out information and in information based on your worldview. Now we chatted a little bit more about this in depth in the last session, but that worldview, your biases, your beliefs, your brain doesn't show you all the information out there. That's way too much. It's too much for your brain to process. We receive millions of points of data per second. There's no way we can consciously process all of that information. So it filters it in or out based upon your worldview. And it may or may not align with reality. So because we want to check our cognitive bias frequently and make sure that we're in alignment as much as possible from that reality. What's interesting is, because most of us are moving so fast through our daily life, we miss the opportunities to ensure that we're connecting at our core being and producing the results that honor who we are as individuals. Now, with that said, let's shift mental gears a bit and invite innovation into our minds. But now that I've blown your brains a little bit, let's invite innovation into our minds and take a breath, literally. Because interestingly, the fast pace I just mentioned inhibits our ability to cope with daily life. Okay? Much less produce the results and achieve goals that we really want to. Because we're moving so fast, because we live in this myth that faster is better, that more equals success. And in fact, we haven't even evolved yet to handle what we're dealing with right now. Our modern society, our modern world of these smart devices, they're not even a speck on the evolutionary timeline. They don't even show up. They're so new. Yet we expect ourselves just to take on more and more and more. No. You want to know, my friends, why we all feel a little tired and exhausted? Maybe the season, maybe a lot of expectations at work. By and large, it's because we all have too much on our minds. We're not equipped to handle our modern society. It showed up a little too quickly for evolution. Now, evolution will catch up, and it'll take a while, okay? So, in order for us to handle what we're dealing with, we have to build in reflection. We have to build in what I call power pause. Now, if you joined last session, this won't be new for you. But if you're new and you've just not seen me last session, we are going to do just a quick power pause. And what this does is designed, leveraging neuroscience, to help shift you out of that high stress, high brain wave, which isn't productive, down to a lower, more productive brain wave, and shift back into the parasympathetic nervous system and out of your fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, which is the only coping mechanism we have for stress. Just one: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. That's it. We don't have another one. We do not have another coping mechanism for long-term stress, which we've been under since 2020. We don't have one. That is all we have. So we have a lot of things, including disaster fatigue. But this helps us cope with what we're dealing with right now and give our brains the very necessary breather. So if you'd like to, speaking of breather, this is what's called a physiological sigh. Don't ask me why they call it that. It doesn't matter. This is what works based on neuroscience, and all we have to do is breathe in all the way down to our diaphragm, where our belly button is, to the nose, as much as possible. Open our mouth for the last inhale of breath, exhaling all the CO2 from our lungs, and let it out slowly through the mouth. If you'd like to, play along. If not, no worries. Inhale through the mouth and through the nose. That's it. Now, if you want to, you can focus on your breathing, not to control it, just to become aware of it, and taking the next step further. Now, I do have a video link that will be coming your way. Rhonda has been so kind as to say, yes, we will share all the resources you have. And I will share that, and that will be coming to all of you who have registered for this series. That and more. I have some Christmas gifts for you. So not only will I do that, I'll also give you my guide and more information beyond this particular session. So if you played along with that very quick power pause, did you feel anything? Did anything come up for you? Well, while you're thinking about that, I'd like to know how many of you feel that we learn from our experiences? I know, total shift. How many of you feel like that we learn from our experiences? Pop that in the chat, along with what maybe came up for you while I do that breathing. Definitely, says Linda. Yes, of course, absolutely. We should, says someone. Ha, ha, ha. Yes, yep. Okay, great. So people here think we learn from our experiences. Yes and no. Or the good old-fashioned consultant answer, that depends. We do not learn from our experiences unless we reflect on them. That's right. We do not learn from our experiences unless we reflect on that experience, and not in a judgy, berating way. What I've noticed and what we found is that in our very fast-paced what next society and an instant gratification society, it gets in the way of our own growth. Let's give you a for instance. When was the last time you were waiting for something somewhere? An airport, to pick up a rental car, waiting for a doctor's office, anything, waiting for anything. When you looked around, if you did, what did you notice? Anybody? Last time you were waiting for something, what did you notice? What were other people doing? Everybody's on their phone, also waiting. Yes, absolutely. You noticed this. That's what you saw, probably. But if you're in America, now, if you're abroad, like say France, that's not what you see. You see a bunch of people arguing probably about something political. That's from my French friend. She said that, okay? So you can be mad at her if you're French. Everybody's on their smartphones. Everybody's on their devices these days. When was the last time someone was just bored or looking around? Did anybody look bored just looking around or having a conversation? Oh, no, of course not. Very rarely. It was a wild rarity that on the way to Reno to my last keynote, that I actually had a conversation with someone on the plane the entire way there. Admittedly, it's a small plane. Irregardless, it was a rarity and a novelty, a welcome novelty, I might add. But thanks to the fact we don't have these brief moments where we're just waiting, we're bored. We don't have these moments. So what happens is when we're consumed doing this, we don't have the moment to think, to just noodle around on our brains, to reflect. Plus, with these things, we're only shown more of what we are already interested in. That's a convenience, right? Well, actually, what it does is it means that we do not use a very critical brain growth function, and it's called neuroplasticity. That's the only big word I'll throw at you. Neuroplasticity is the ability for our brains to accept and form new ideas. It's how our brains grow. It's how our brains form new ways of thinking, new neural pathways, adapt. When someone habitually avoids or isn't shown this or does not incite neuroplasticity, that person finds it harder to be neuroplastic. They find it harder to accept new ideas. And I notice this particularly as people get more candles on their birthday cake, particularly well advanced in the birthday cake. There's less stimulation. When there's less stimulation, there's less neuroplasticity. Then there is less ability to change, to grow. And what's interesting is we used to think that our brains change and grow only up to the age of 18. That's not, in fact, at all true. That was debunked years ago. We can change and grow in our brains, even our fundamental beliefs, into well advanced age. In other words, within certain parameters, you can be just about anybody you want to be. That's right. However, if someone is not exercising this ability, which is natural, everybody has it, your brain becomes kind of an echo chamber. And that's one of the few drawbacks to virtual work. And to be honest with you, so remote work actually does reduce neuroplasticity. Easy for me to say now that I've said it 5 times. It reduces neuroplasticity. It also degrades brain health. So not remote work, but the reduction of neuroplasticity, always being shown with more of what you want, never getting outside of the box, degrades brain health and increases cellular death. That's a scientific word. I didn't make that up to sound like, oh my God, trauma. No, actually, absolutely not. So this is why the art of the power pause is so important. This is why having brief moments of reflection, just 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 3 times a day. Everybody has 5 minutes 3 times a day. Even if you think you don't, you do. You have 5 minutes 3 times a day. Just to pause, just to reflect. And it's so incredibly important because it helps you build mental muscles. Now that we've had a moment to pause and reflect, and with your new, clear, and curious mind, I'll share a couple other fun facts. Your thinking, your mindset, your beliefs, etc., like I mentioned, are not fixed. You can change all of those into well advanced age. However, most of us are programmed, unfortunately, due to our cultural circumstances or family, those people who shaped our worldview, to focus on what we don't want. That's, by the way, not a natural thing. Being negatively biased is not natural. That is learned behavior. Yes. And we don't pause often enough to reflect. Oop, got a little excited there. I got really excited. I wanted to go to the next thing. And part of your brain believes everything you say. So be careful what you say to you. You're listening. And it wants to prove you right, as I mentioned. But now that we've turned what you think you know about the brain inside out, and let's dive deeper into some practical tips about what we can do. Now, last time we went over some of these areas. If you want to know more about this, please do catch the recording on YouTube and check it out in more detail. Challenging in order to build neuroplasticity, we have to challenge our assumptions regularly. Strengths, and positive psychology, for example, is to build on what works and mitigate disruptors. So you want to build on what works, not repeat things that don't. Words, be careful what you say to you because you're listening. And also, by the way, our words have a social impact as well. Because not only you're impacting your own brain function, you're also impacting other people's brain function. So your words are very, very powerful. In fact, human beings are the only animal that communicates in this way, and that words and communication, as far as we know, again, we haven't done that much research in other animals, but human beings are the only ones that words carry as much weight and actually impact brain function, as far as we know. Now, focusing your energy, your brain, again, prioritizes where you put your focus. So focus on what you want, not what you don't. Feedback is how we grow. And again, we need that reflection. But let's go and learn more about what works. So let's build on what works. And these are some things that I use, not only personally, but also with my clients and with the groups that I coach and train. So let's talk about establishing mental tone. I mentioned earlier when I was chatting a little bit about my book that having the right mental environment was critical, not only to manage what we're dealing with right now, but show up in the way that we want to show up. Because if you think about it, if you take a step back from all of the things I've thrown at you, okay, we know all of this stuff is going on. Oh my gosh, your brain does what? Breath, breathe. Okay, right, so we know all that. We also know that our influence, our ability to impact the world around us is defined by who we are, how we're showing up in the moment. So let's make sure that we're showing up how we want to show up. And number one is your mental environment or your mental tone. or mindset, if you want to call it that. This is what works every time, and it works for every mental, let's say, neurotypical human being. Gratitude first is very important because when you, say, for example, start the day with a gratitude focus first, envision what you want, and hold on to the emotion that you want, that is like putting your best foot forward. And there's some very real research behind that. Now, I'm the person who have always been kind of a get it done, what next kind of gal. And I wasn't really keen to latch on to the whole gratitude practice because I thought it was a little fluffy. I was like, that's just fluffy. Now I take it all back. I have to take it back because it really isn't fluff. It really is science. Having that gratitude first perspective helps set the right mental tone, helps set you up for the day. And then that is like a domino effect. The rest of the day goes much better. Trust me, I've done personal studies on this, and I can tell you definitively, if I don't have that intention, even if it's for only 2 minutes because I've got a 7 a.m. call, the rest of the day goes beep. So let's just say I don't do it because that 7 a.m. call and I didn't get much sleep the night before and I had to roll out of bed and hop on Teams. Okay, fine, I did that. As soon as that Teams call ends, I'm out taking a breather, doing my breath work for 5 minutes, setting my mental tone, and the rest of the day goes well. If I don't do it, it does not go well. And my clients all report the same thing. Research says the same thing as well. But you probably already know this. Oh yes, everybody talks about gratitude. And now you know there's a real scientific reason why it works. Having an outward mindset. This is extremely important as well. Now, what does that mean? That means thinking about how you impact others intentionally, thinking about it, keeping it more top of mind instead of it being a side thought or an afterthought, which is even worse. That's how I used to be. Thinking about other people was an afterthought for me. I didn't really put it first like I should have, and it hurt my career at the time. When I started putting other people, not necessarily first, but more on top of mind, how am I behaving and how will they take it? And not in a, oh my gosh, I need their approval kind of way, but how am I intentionally impacting this person? That changed everything for me. And it made me get a promotion within about 9 months of me making that change, by the way. So it does matter. Not only does it show other people that we care, it automatically creates more connections. Because even if you aren't consciously doing it, other people are getting that intent from you on the, let's just say, subconscious level, so through body language. To the point earlier was asking around, so as everything just boiled down to communication. This is a part of that communication bubble, if you will. Also, creating an open and curious mind. And we do that through, I gotta have myself, power pause. Power pause, which we just did. Our information overloaded in our society. Power pause, what it does to name a few things, and when you get your guide, you'll see all of the things, but it improves your mental recall, so it improves memory. It also improves emotional balance just by doing this 3 times a day. Seriously, improves emotional balance. It improves your ability to make sound decisions and improves your prioritization matrix, which leads into those sound decisions, and some more. So by practicing this intentional pause helps you prioritize and avoid derailment during the day. It also reduces the amount of emotional swings that you have throughout the day. Oh my God, I can't believe this happened. Wow. You're better able to show up intentionally versus reacting or predicting how you should be, as we now know. Okay, so open curiosity. Having an open and curious mind. Why is that important? Well, creating that non-judgmental space. Now, I will say that all of us do judge things. In other words, we're a meaning-making animal. We make meaning about things, and it's very personal. However, when we are communicating with someone, if we are willing and allowing to let some of that natural habit go and not be so quick to rate, judge, qualify, and criticize whatever is coming out of someone's mouth, and having more open curiosity in the moment and practicing that restraint, it allows us to see answers and opportunities where if we didn't, those answers and opportunities may not show up for us, particularly when we're talking about innovation. This is a critical skill, and it's a skill that's taught to all coaches, by the way. It is the ability to mitigate and practicing restraint with answer seeking. We tend to seek answers, and that's something we're programmed to do, particularly in public education. We got to have the answer. Well, if you are constantly thinking about your answer, you're not listening to what's being said, which I'll dive more into in a moment. There's also something else. Hyperplanning often happens if we don't practice open curiosity. And what's wrong with hyperplanning? Well, hyperplanning, when we plan to infinite detail, actually limits the amount of opportunities that can show up because we told our brain in finite detail what we want to have happen, so it's not allowing any other information in. Yes. Deep listening, also important. Active listening, we've heard about. Most people don't know what it actually means. So most people listen to respond, which is, I'm waiting for you to stop talking so I can say something. And we all know those people. Or they're at best listening to relate. When unfortunately I say something to my mother, well, this and so happened. Oh yeah, well that happened to me, only such and such and such and such. So she's not really hearing what I'm saying. She's not taking it in. She's not going, oh wow, that happened for you. So how did it make you feel? Or what did you do? She wasn't openly curious. She was listening to respond and relate. She thinks she's being empathetic. In actuality, that's the least empathetic thing you can possibly ever do. And reflection. The power of reflection, and particularly non-judgmental reflection, because a lot of us will sit here and beat ourselves up. I can't believe I did that. That was so stupid. Now, what does that do to your mindset? You think that does anything good? Pop in the chat if you talk to yourself like you would talk to your best friend. I'd like to hear that. What do you talk to yourself like you talk to your best friend? Pop in the chat whether you do or not. Reflection in a non-judgmental, openly curious way, just like you would treat someone else, is extremely important for yourself. Because if you're constantly beating yourself up, how often are you wanting to reflect? Not very often. It's like, well, take for example, my husband, bless him, he's a PhD engineer, love him to death. He doesn't get everything right. So he'll go and do the groceries, which I am very thankful for and have learned a long time ago not to say anything when he gets the wrong thing. Because if you say something and he gets the wrong thing and you say, oh my gosh, why did you get that? Then he won't want to say. He won't want to go to the grocery store anymore, right? So be careful how you talk to yourself. The most successful people practice these, at least 3 of these daily habits. So as you're just noodling on this, I'm going to hop over to the next slide, which talks about results. Pop in the chat what works well for you, because some of these probably are not vastly new concepts, although they're coming out from a slightly different neuroscience perspective. And I'd love to hear what works well for you, because this discussion, honestly, also wouldn't be the same if we didn't talk about results. And what we're talking about here, like I mentioned before, better emotional balance, less stress, better decision making, better connections, inclusivity, so you're included more in those around you, more decision making. If you show up in a calm, considerate, and intentional way, by the way, that is what people coin as executive presence. Yes, a lot of people can't define it, but that's actually what it is. Linda says, active listening to understand what people are trying to share and what they experience. Yes, absolutely. And it takes practice to do that because it's not something that naturally happens for us oftentimes. But what's interesting when we practice these methods, and they're very simple and very straightforward, but they have a very real neuroscience background why we should be doing this. We can pick up on nuances of conversations. We can have a better perspective and improve decision making. We can be more quick to grow and develop. And looking forward, these skills and more are non-negotiable to navigate the future of work. Empathy first leadership, positive self-regard, collaborative conversations, not directive, mental agility and self-command are all now required in our society and our workplaces. We can no longer simply get things done like I used to do when I was a young professional. Um, we might be able to get somewhere, but it won't necessarily get us beyond a certain point. So thinking of beyond, what's your top takeaway? I'd love to hear from you and start thinking about your questions that you want as we wrap up our conversation today. What struck a chord with you and what would you like to explore more? Because as I mentioned before, I'll be sending you some resources through Rhonda. She'll be sending you some more information, including links to the Power Pause guides and additional information to help you explore how you can leverage your amazing brain to get the responses you want in your professional and personal life. And I love this quote by Henry Ford because it is so true. Achievements really start with you. And it's a very simple quote, but it's great straight talk, and it is very, very true. You're the master of your experiences. My fond wish for all of you, my friends, this conversation ignites a spark of clarity and confidence within you as you move into the holiday season and next year. And with that, I welcome any questions that you might have. If you'd like me to clarify anything, I'm happy to do so.
Well, thank you so much, Erin Urban. Let's give a big round of applause and a thank you. Please put your questions in the chat, if you will. We have one, you mentioned the power of mindset and really us being able to, for lack of a better word, change our realities, change what we're experiencing, and change the context which we're operating in to innovate in all areas of our life. What's the one thing that you can recommend for people who may not be familiar with this tactic? What would you advise to help us shift to this new and improved mindset, envisioning future stating?
Right. So what we know is, that's a great question. What we know is what we focus on is what your brain will want to reproduce for you. So if you focus on something once, it's not a big deal, but if you continue to focus on something, then the brain takes that as a priority for you. And it doesn't have any discernment as to whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent. And oftentimes, this is why, take for example, if you're going for a job interview and you're visualizing the worst, your brain thinks that's what you want, right? So when we talk about eliciting the micro actions that drive the experience we want to have, it's very important to think about in some degree of clarity. It doesn't have to be finite detail, but there's a three key things. One is the what, having a target. You don't have to know all the nuances and all the details. That's not necessary. And by and large, we should really just let a lot of the details go. Let's just say you want to, we'll just say, get a job at a certain industry. Okay, that's great. That's all you really need to tell the brain. And then the next thing is, how do you want to feel in that job? That's very important. The emotion is the calling card of the brain, and it helps also make sure that whatever actions you take are going to drive you towards that feeling. And when you think about it, when we're thinking about whatever we want to do, we're doing things to get a feeling, not just when we think about experiences, it's really a feeling, not just to take a good picture, right? There's a feeling, and when we look at pictures, we have an emotion. So emotion is a lot more central than you realize. And the other thing is, when you're thinking about this, think about it in clarity. I won't say vivid detail, because again, we need to let go of having to have a lot of the details, like the how, the when, the what, and the who. It doesn't matter. Just and a lot of people want to call this manifestation, and I don't like using that term because it implies some sort of woo-woo with crystals and blah. And no, it's neuroscience. It's how your brain works. Okay. And it's not, it's like I like to say, it's like magic, but not, it's science. So you want to think of this once very vividly and then let it go. Now you think to yourself, but wait a minute. You just said the more you repeat that, the better and more important it is. Well, yes and no. So I can go into that in more detail, but I'll shut up because I know we've got it time, and I've got a lot to talk about, clearly.
Well, again, a huge thank you for our wrap up December 2023 speaker, Miss Erin Urban, with her 2-session program. We hope that each of her wonderful sessions with us has been informative, innovative, and really helped move you forward. There are so many takeaways tonight, Miss Erin Urban, for us to move through the holidays, to reflect, to think about the tools in our toolkit, what we've been utilizing as best practices, and everything that you've been sharing with us over the course of the last sessions to really be able to shift the way that we approach what 2024 can be and what we can be experiencing, and the experience and feeling set that we're offering to others. Again, my gratitude for your wonderful leadership, for your consulting, coaching, mentoring, and for your being a change agent with each and every one of us. For those of you that are on the line tonight, we just want to say thank you for a wonderful ASQ Innovation TC webinar season and set of sessions with you. We're grateful for your support of our programs. We're grateful for your ideas on what you'd like to hear about going forward into 24. We wish you happy holidays 2023 and a very happy new year 2024. On behalf of our chair, Miss Rebecca Mott, our secretary, Miss Jackie Jolly, our immediate past chair and treasurer, Mr. Larry Miller. We want to know that we are so interested in hearing from you. And if you're interested in joining our team or learning more about our volunteer opportunities, please reach out to our chair, Miss Rebecca Mott. While this may be the last session of 2023, we have more on our plate for you for 2024. So we invite you back on the 19th of January, the 23rd of February, and the 28th of March with our upcoming speakers, Mr. Peter Merrill, Dr. Ron Kelly, and Dr. Sean Jameson, who will be talking about creativity, innovation, and the intersections with ethics, AI, and the law. Again, this is ASQ Innovation TC, thanking our guest speaker, Ms. Erin Urban, for a phenomenal session tonight. And again, we wish you a wonderful holiday season, and we look forward to connecting with you on our webinar seasons and sessions in 2024. That's ASQ Innovation TC out for 2023. As Miss Erin Urban mentioned, we will have a deck follow on, her gifts to you, and a discussion on all things that Miss Erin Urban raised over her last section. So we'll look forward to connecting with you soon on those wonderful resources. Again, we thank you for your patronage. We thank our guest speaker, and ASQ Innovation TC out. Thank you and good night.